Choosing your sensitivity in Fortnite is one of the most important decisions that you'll make, because it will affect everything from how well you can aim to how well you can build. But there are no clear guidelines about sensitivity, so it's difficult to know what to use. And using the wrong sensitivity could be what's holding you back from becoming a better Fortnite player. Hi, I'm Cram, and in this video, I'm going to explain everything you need to know about mouse sensitivity in Fortnite. We're going to be diving deep into the details, covering everything from eDPI, X and Y sensitivity, and targeting and scope sensitivity. So make sure you watch this whole video. But before we get started, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on post notifications, so when I release a new video, you get notified. Now, what is the best Fortnite sensitivity? The truth is, there is no single value that's going to be perfect for all players. And you know that lower sensitivities offer greater precision, and higher sensitivities offer better mobility, so you want your sensitivity to have a good balance of both. You can think of sensitivity as a range, and there's a reasonable sensitivity range that most Fortnite players should set their sensitivity within. But many players fall outside of this range because they just don't know what it is. So how do we find this range of suitable sensitivities? Well, by looking at what the best Fortnite players are using. And I'm not talking about merely copying some random pro player sensitivity, because that's not going to work. It's not going to have the desired effect. It's not that simple. Listen, I've analysed the sensitivity of over 300 Fortnite pro players, so we have a set of quantified data, and I've taken it a step further and looked at the settings of the top 20 highest earning Fortnite players, representing the very best players. And now I'm going to break everything down for you in an easy to follow, step-by-step guide. First, let's start with your X and Y sensitivity. Your X sensitivity sets the sensitivity of the mouse's horizontal or X axis. With higher settings, the camera will move faster when looking left and right with a mouse. Your Y sensitivity sets the sensitivity of the mouse's vertical Y axis. With higher settings, the camera will move faster when looking up and down with a mouse. Now the first question we need to answer is, should your X and Y sensitivities be the same value or different? Listen, when Fortnite was first released, you had no option to set separate X and Y sensitivities. You just had one single mouse sensitivity and that was it. By default, your Y sensitivity was 75% or 3/4 of your X sensitivity. So if your mouse sensitivity was 0.1, then your Y sensitivity was 0.075, or 10% and 7.5% in today's percentage values. Players today have continued to keep their Y sensitivity lower than their X sensitivity, but I recommend that you set your X and Y sensitivities to the same value. So if you use 7.4% for your X sensitivity, then you should use exactly 7.4% for your Y sensitivity. And here's why. As you know, there's a lot of verticality in Fortnite because of the building. In other words, you're going to be moving your mouse up and down a lot, so you want your vertical or Y sensitivity to be high, so you have a good mobility in that axis. Also, when you keep your X and Y sensitivity the same, it allows for more consistent mouse movements throughout the entire plane of motion. With that being said, let's take a look at the relationship of X and Y sensitivities for our set of 353 pro Fortnite players. You can see that 82% of players have their X and Y sensitivities to the same value, and only 18% set it differently. Now let's take it one step further and look at the relationship between X and Y sensitivity for the very best Fortnite players, or the top 20 highest earners. Here we see the proportion of players using the same X and Y sensitivity is even higher, at 90%. So the data backs up the theory that we just discussed. Therefore, you should keep your X and Y sensitivities the same. But what exact value should you use for your X and Y sensitivity? Well, there's actually another reason for keeping your X and Y sensitivities to the same value, and that's to do with your eDPI in Fortnite, which allows for a standard way of measuring your mouse sensitivity. Let me explain. The problem we have with Fortnite sensitivity is that players can use a different mouse DPI, and this will influence your overall sensitivity, I have a video explaining everything you need to know about mouse DPI, including the DPI that more than 80% of Fortnite players use, and there'll be a notification on the screen now if you want to watch that video. Anyway, so two players could have the same in-game sensitivity, say 10%, but if they use a different mouse DPI, then their overall sensitivity could be very different. The solution to this problem is to use eDPI. eDPI stands for effective dots per inch, and you can think of it as your true Fortnite sensitivity. You can calculate your eDPI by multiplying your mouse DPI by your in-game sensitivity. For example, if you have 800 DPI and 8% in-game sensitivity, then your eDPI is 64. I also have a video that goes into detail about how to calculate your eDPI, and I have a free eDPI calculator on my website that you can find at kr4m.com/fortnite-edpi-calculator, and there'll be a link to that in the description for you to use. The reason I'm telling you all of this is because you'll now need to know your eDPI for the next section to make any sense, and this is probably the most important part of the video, so go and find out your eDPI right now before you continue watching. Now that you have your eDPI, we can get into the good stuff, the data. On your screen, you'll see a chart of the eDPI for more than 300 Fortnite Pro players and streamers. The orange bar represents the numbers of players that are using an eDPI between the ranges that you see on the x-axis. You can see the most common eDPI range is between 47 and 52, because that's where the orange bar is the highest. There's also a normal distribution between about 32 and 82, and most players' eDPI go as high as about 122 before we see a significant drop-off. Of course, you can see a spike at the tail end, and this is because the range goes between 129 and 510, which is a very large range, and these represent the outliers using a very high eDPI. I wouldn't recommend setting your eDPI this high. When you use a sensitivity this high, it's going to be hard for you to control your aim, which is important in Fortnite because it's a shooter game. You know you want your sensitivity to be low enough to get the most precision, but high enough so you can have good mobility for turning quickly and building. So let's take a look at some of the key statistics from this data. The average eDPI is 70. However, this number is going to be slightly skewed upwards because of the amount of players using a very high sensitivity. The median eDPI is 56, and this is a very good representative of the set. This is the equivalent of 800 DPI and 7% in-game sensitivity. The mode, or most common eDPI, is 48, and the standard deviation is 53, which is quite high and means there's a lot of variation from the average. Now, I think there's a lot of value in looking at this large dataset of 300 pro players and streamers, but I think there's even more value to be had when we look at the very best of the best Fortnite players, the top 0.0001%. So here's the data from the top 20 highest earning Fortnite players, and you can see the distribution of eDPI is much tighter with fewer outliers. And you can also see that the most popular sensitivity range half the players are using is between 45 and 63. Here are some of the key statistics from this data. The average eDPI is 50, and this is more representative since there's less outliers, and the median eDPI is 48, which is slightly lower than our previous set of 300 pro players. The mode, or most common eDPI, is 48 as well, and the standard deviation is 19. This is much lower than the previous and suggests this data is more reliable and with less variation. So what does all this data even mean? What are the key takeaways? What do you want to know? Well, an eDPI between about 36 and 68 is going to be about perfect for the majority of Fortnite players. Of course, there are some very good players that fall outside of this range and prefer to use a sensitivity that's higher or lower. I already think the 36 is on the lower end of the scale, and setting it lower is going to have minimal impact on your aiming precision. In other words, it's already at the point of diminishing returns. But you can certainly go higher if you feel it would benefit you. I would say up to about an eDPI of 20 is the upper limit. This is a high sensitivity, but you do have ways to control this further, which is what we'll discuss in the next section. In this next section, I'm going to talk to you about targeting sensitivity. Your targeting sensitivity sets a modifier for reducing mouse sensitivity when targeting or aiming down sights. For example, 100% will have no slowdown when targeting, and lower settings will have more slowdown when targeting. You can calculate your target insensitivity eDPI by multiplying your regular eDPI, which we calculated earlier, by your target insensitivity. For example, if your eDPI is 64 and you use a 30% mouse target insensitivity, then your mouse target insensitivity is 64 multiplied by 30%, which is 19.2. So what mouse target insensitivity should you use? Let's take a look at the data for the 300 Pro Fortnite players and streamers. As you can see, the numbers here are a little all over the place, but the majority of players, which is roughly a third, are using a mouse target insensitivity of 100%. This means their sensitivity will have no slowdown when targeting. And here are the key statistics of this data. The average is 67%, the mode of most common is 100% as we know, the median is 65%, and the standard deviation is 25%. This data suggests that you should set your mouse target insensitivity to 100%, since it's the most popular value. But before you go ahead and do that, let's take a look at the mouse target insensitivity for our top 20 highest earning Fortnite players to help inform our decision. Now you see the majority of players are using a mouse target insensitivity less than 100%. More precisely, the majority of the top 20 highest earning Fortnite players are using a mouse target insensitivity between about 30% and 70%. Let's take a look at the key statistics again. The average is 55%, the mode is 100% again, the median is 51.5%, and the standard deviation is 24%. So the best Fortnite players, on average, use a mouse target insensitivity of 55%. This means your sensitivity when targeting or aiming down sights is about half the speed of your normal sensitivity. Now that we've looked at the data, let's consider the options you have for your mouse target insensitivity. The first option you have is you can set your mouse target insensitivity to 100%, meaning you'll have no slowdown when aiming down your sights. In this case, your movements will be more consistent, and this will allow for easier training of your aim, since your sensitivity is always going to be the same. Another option is that you can set your mouse target insensitivity to a much lower value, say around 30%. This will allow for greater precision when aiming down your sights. Or you could set your mouse target insensitivity to around 70%, so you have some slowdown when aiming down sights, but you still have some speed so you can move quickly as well. I think that a mouse target insensitivity of about 50% is going to be right for most players, but because there is a lot of variance in the base sensitivity you're using, it's difficult to give an exact recommendation. But in general, the higher your base sensitivity is, then the lower your target insensitivity should be. And if you're already using a very low sensitivity, then you could use a higher target insensitivity. This will allow you to bring your mouse target insensitivity eDPI more in the middle or to where you want it to be. Now that we've covered target insensitivity, let's go into your scope sensitivity. Your scope sensitivity is the same as your target insensitivity in that it sets a modifier for reducing mouse sensitivity, but this time it's when you're using a scope weapon, such as a sniper rifle. As before, 100% will have no slowdown when using a scope, and lower settings will have more slowdown when scoped. Let's get straight into the data. You can see here that the distribution is about the same as it was for the target insensitivity, with similar averages and so on. And now here's how it looks for the top 20 highest earning Fortnite players. Again, it's pretty much the same as it was for the mouse target insensitivity. I don't want to dwell too much on the mouse scope sensitivity too much, because this video is already getting quite lengthy, and the principles are very much the same as they were for the previous section about target insensitivity. So my recommendation is to set your scope sensitivity to the same as your target insensitivity. So if you use 50% for your target insensitivity, you should use the same number for your scope sensitivity, 50%. The reason for this is that so you have greater consistency when aiming, and this will allow you to train your aim more quickly, so your brain learns faster. However, if you want to have more speed when using a scope weapon than you do when aiming down sights with a different weapon, then feel free to set your scope sensitivity a little higher like some players do. Now that we've covered all of the sensitivity values you can configure in your Fortnite settings, I want to talk quickly about your Windows pointer speed and mouse acceleration. In your mouse properties and pointer options, you have the ability to set a pointer speed, as well as whether or not to enable enhanced pointer precision. Many guides will tell you to set your pointer speed to 6 out of 11 so you don't skip pixels, and to disable enhanced pointer precision because enhanced pointer precision is a form of mouse acceleration. And mouse acceleration adjusts your cursor movement based on how fast you move your mouse. Mouse acceleration is bad for gamers because you want to have a 1-to-1 ratio between your mouse movements and your cursor movements so you can be as consistent as possible. But I want to tell you that your Windows mouse settings do not matter in Fortnite because Fortnite does not have mouse acceleration and it uses your raw input. In fact, most modern video games do use raw input. Still, it's worth setting your Windows pointer speed to 6 out of 11 and disabling enhanced pointer precision because unfortunately, some players do not use raw input and this is going to allow you to have a better gaming experience for those games. So to conclude, there's no such thing as the best sensitivity, and if there was, then every pro player would be using the same value. And as you've learned from watching this video, there's a lot of variety in the sensitivities of pro Fortnite players. But there are some useful trends we can use to make meaningful decisions. A good general rule for your sensitivity is that you should be able to do a full 360-degree turn when moving your mouse from one side of your mousepad to the other. Also, you should be able to easily turn 180 degrees by flicking your mouse to the left and to the right, because you'll often need to turn around quickly in Fortnite, when building or in combat. And from our analysis of hundreds of pro players and the top 20 highest earners, we're able to define more specific guidelines when it comes to Fortnite mouse sensitivity. And to wrap this up, here are the key takeaways. Number 1. Set your eDPI between about 36 and 68. However, you can go as high as about 120. Number 2, keep your x-axis and y-axis sensitivity to the same value, so you have consistent movements in both planes. Number 3, your mouse targeting sensitivity and mouse scope sensitivity should be the same, and they should be set between about 30% and 70%. Of course, it's going to take some experimentation for you to find your perfect sensitivity. Ultimately, the best sensitivity is the one you've been using the longest, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try a new sensitivity. Look, even within the range that I've given you, there are about 1,000 different sensitivity options, because you also have to consider the decimal points. In other words, the chances of you randomly stumbling upon your perfect sensitivity on your first try is almost zero. So go forth and experiment. Have fun and enjoy the process. And don't worry if your favorite Fortnite player is using a sensitivity that's different to you. You see, if players can become a pro by using all different kinds of sensitivities, then so can you. Anyway, that's the end of this video, and I hope you found it useful. If you have, then please like the video and subscribe to the channel because it really helps me out. Thank you so much for watching, and have an amazing day. Peace.